a client contacted me. This was some 2 years ago, and the client advised she wants to apply for permanent residence. She wants her spouse to sponsor her. She was here in Canada, and her spouse was also in Canada. When you're sponsoring your spouse, there are two ways of doing so, either overseas sponsorship or in Canada sponsorship. In Canada is when both parties are in Canada. Overseas is when the sponsor is here in Canada and the sponsored person is abroad, or when both are abroad. But in this case, both were in Canada, so it was supposed to be a very straightforward application. But it was a bit of an issue because the sponsor had some form of disability and he wasn't working. And one of the requirements of the program of sponsoring your spouse is you must show proof of income. In fact, he was on support, government support, which made the file very complicated. And since the sponsored person, the spouse, did not have a work permit, she couldn't work. And the amount of money he was getting from the government was not sufficient to take care of himself as much as his spouse. So that really raised a huge problem with immigration. We explained as much as we could, and we got a letter from immigration advising the application will be refused. Why? Because this person is dependent on the government and he's trying to sponsor his spouse, and she doesn't have work authorization in Canada. So we explained to the government saying, this person has some form of disability. His spouse is willing to be with him, to look after him, to make sure he's okay, and you can see improvement. The spouse doesn't have a work permit, but the spouse has certificates that shows she's a caregiver. What more can a sponsored person need? And if the spouse is issued a work permit, she can work and also support her husband. And eventually getting a permanent residence, she also will be able to work and support the family. But the government came back and said, so how is she supporting herself? We need to know. At that point, we know we had to think outside the box. And we know for sure that she's very much involved with her church. We wrote to the church, and the church, they did provide proof of the support that they give. The church would send groceries to the family. The church would send they make contributions for the family. She's got friends here in Canada and also overseas who sends, a few dollars here and there for the family. And she's got her savings from her country of citizenship. So we had all these documented. Every month they send such kinds of support. So we explained to the government, as you can see, she's not doing anything illegal. She's here looking after a Canadian citizen who needs help. The best interest of the sponsor should be number one. And having the spouse here with her who will support him, they'll be able to move to a better place. She'll be able to get better jobs. She'll be able to look after her husband. It would help his condition. And the officer said, you know what, this makes sense. Sometimes you just have to be reasonable, And there is no provision that states somebody who's got some form of disability cannot sponsor. You just have to show that, yes, the person who's been sponsored meets all the requirements, and you have documentations to back that up. So to cut the long story short, it was approved. A month after we put in our bunch of evidence, the file was approved.